John Boehner now, former Speaker of the House. Mr. Speaker, thank you. It's good to see you again. You know, there's a common narrative these days that the Republican Party is completely divided. Is that an overreaction?
Well, I don't know about completely divided, but there certainly is a divide in the party. You've got what I'll call the Trump loyalists, and then you have more traditional Republicans. And you got some members who are both. So it's a bit of a problem. The Democrats have the same problems between traditional Democrats and the left-wing progressives, and so it's kind of a feature of a modern-day politics when you have essentially a two-party system.
But on the Democratic side, do you see that the more extremes of their party are driving the narrative in the way that you've suggested they are in the Republican Party?
I do, and the things that Bernie Sanders wants, Elizabeth Warren wants, are not the things that the more moderate Democrats in both the House and Senate want. And so it's going to be interesting to see if they can resolve this in some way going forward.
In your recent book, you wrote that former President Trump, as you put it, and I'm quoting, incited that bloody insurrection for nothing more than selfish reasons, referring obviously to the insurrection on January the 6th. Not enough Republican senators, Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware, supported an independent commission being formed to examine what happened there. First of all, what do you make of that? And were you in power, what would you do?
Well, listen, I watched, like everybody else did, every day after the election when Donald Trump was making these exaggerated claims about the election outcome. Having been around elections for 40 years, I've been involved in resolving disputed elections during that time as well. I kept looking for the evidence, never saw it. And so Donald Trump does, in fact, bear some of the blame for what happened on January the 6th. Now, when it comes to a commission to look at it, listen, I've been through this more times than you can count. It's hard to get both parties to agree to a fair commission. I've just been there too many times. There's been too many discussions. And clearly, you've got a bunch of Republican senators who don't believe that what the Democrats are aiming to do is, in their view, fair. And so they're going to kick this around. But I have no doubt that the facts are going to show up. Whether it's
I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to ask if you believe that the American people deserve to know exactly what was happening and who might have been or might not have been involved.
Oh, I think that the American people absolutely need to know what happened.
Shouldn't Congress have to make that happen?
Listen, I think it's going to happen whether it's this bipartisan commission or whether you have committees in Congress who will uncover these facts. And the American people are going to get the facts. We're the most open, transparent society the world's ever known. We'll get the facts.
Mr. Speaker, the political focus is now turning to the 2022 midterms. Republicans are obviously hoping to take back either the House or the Senate or both. How should congressional leaders be approaching these midterms? What should their message from the Republican Party be?
Well, I think they need to find common ground with the Biden administration if they can and where they can. And secondly, oppose the Biden administration or those in Congress who are pushing the Biden administration to the more liberal, extreme measures that they're pushing. But thirdly, and most importantly, lay out a vision for what a Republican majority would mean for the country. This is it's not difficult. We've done it many times. But the American people have to see what you're for. It's easy to figure out what you're against.
With former President Trump as the sort of titular head of the Republican Party, at least the narrative leader, is that possible? And if so, how would you recommend that it's done?
I think you go back to what it means to be a Republican. I believe in fiscal responsibility. I believe in free and fair trade. Down the line, basic Republican values that the party needs to talk about. We're not a party of personalities or pick a word for Donald Trump, but we need to get back to being what it means to be a Republican.
You mentioned fiscal responsibility and core values. Is it your sense that the Republican Party is there now, or does your party need a course correction?
Oh, no, they're not there yet. I mean, I watched what went on in the Trump era. what Republicans in Congress voted for, I kind of shook my head. The 5 years I was Speaker, my main focus was on trying to eliminate the budget deficit. And we lowered the budget deficit 5 years in a row while I was Speaker, even though Barack Obama was president and Harry Reid was the majority leader for most of that time. So Republicans need to get back to being Republicans.
President Biden's considering an overhaul of the tax plan. Would a tax hike of any sort be a big advantage for Republicans going into 22 and 24 elections?
It would be an advantage for them if Democrats could pass it. But I've got my doubts whether Democrats are going to be able to do that. Matter of fact, I've got serious doubts whether they're able to do that.
Well, if we want to lower the deficit and not raise taxes, what do we do?
It boils down to one issue: spending. And, it's time for Congress to take a serious look at how we spend the nation's money. But you can't look into this very far without looking at the big entitlement programs and beginning to make some tweaks in them that wouldn't affect anybody that's retired today or anybody nearing retirement. But
you're suggesting lowering the retirement age for people of a certain age now. So would you say for people who are 40 now, it would be different, or 50 now? Where would you put it?
I don't think you want to bother anybody over 50. All right. But, we raised
so that I'm clear, for people under 50, the retirement age should change. Specifically, what would you recommend?
Every year you move it out a month. And
for how many years?
A number of years. Well, I'll let the Congress figure it out. But we raised the Social Security retirement age. It's on its way to being, I think, 67. There's no reason why you can't move that out a couple of more years and take 20 years in order to get to that point. It's feasible. The bigger issue, Social Security is pretty simple to solve. The bigger questions would be at Medicare and Medicaid.
Of course, a month a year for 12 years, or as you mentioned, 20 years, that doesn't really change the overall deficit picture. Would you suggest that there should be less spending for people in need in this time as we're coming out of a pandemic, but everyone hasn't come out of it?
Well, there's a lot of spending in a lot of areas. I'll let Congress figure out how to do it. All I know is you can't continue to spend money you don't have. You can't do it at home with your family. You can't do it in your business. And guess what? Our government can't do it either.
That sounds like the Republican Party I've known and for the entirety of my life. But it doesn't sound like where the Republican Party is now. It's not what we've been hearing for years, and it's not what we're hearing now as we head toward 2022. Why not?
That's a very good question, Shep. I don't know, but you asked me if I were there.
I figure you know a lot of them. You have to have an idea about why the narrative is about other stuff rather than about those core Republican values as you've described them.
They need to get back and talking about those values, and I think they'll be in better shape.
We now know that cyber attacks, Mr. Speaker, can cripple virtually any American business. We've seen it. What should Congress be doing to protect Americans and American businesses from these hacks?
Well, these acts are mostly done by what I would call non-state actors. And, they're frankly criminal enterprises, but they're very good at what they do. And the federal government needs to take this threat far more seriously than we have to this point. And as a result, I don't know what department needs to take a more active role, but these attacks can cripple our economy overnight. These are acts of war in some sense if they were done by state actors. But again, most of these are done by non-state actors.
Well, that's somewhat generous because we all know non-state actors in Russia don't get to be actors without Vladimir Putin's permission. I mean, that's, as to borrow a phrase, that's a known. So how do you dialogue with Vladimir Putin on it?
Here's the case where, international diplomacy is going to have to play a role. Donald Trump's Joe Biden's going to have this meeting with Putin, who I happen to think is a thug. But I think Biden's going to have to make it clear to Putin that we're not going to tolerate this, especially these Russian hackers. You're right. I mean, they're non-state actors, but we know what happens in Russia. Nobody acts without the blessings from on top. So Putin's going to have to do something about this.
Well, if under that scenario, we've been attacked repeatedly by those non-state actors in Russia who you've just acknowledged can't go about their business without Vladimir Putin. You've called those an act of war if taken out by a state actor. Do we not need to respond in some way, respond in kind against Russia?
Well, I think we either respond in kind or President Biden makes it very clear to Putin that enough's enough, and that either he takes action or we will.
You've known President Biden for decades now. One challenge he obviously faces is the push and pull between the multiple factions in his own party. That's something you're pretty familiar with. Any advice for the president?
Listen, we had a very close election. Biden won his office, frankly, narrowly. You got a 50-50 Senate and virtually 50-50.
It was 6 or 7 million voters, Mr. Speaker. That's traditionally not
the Electoral
narrow.
College was a pretty close election. My point is this. This is not a prescription for a one-party government. It's not a mandate for Joe Biden to get whatever he wants. And so what it is a prescription for bipartisan government. And so I think if the president's going to get much accomplished, he's going to have to find some bipartisan path forward. That means he's going to have to say no to the far left side of his party, which up to now he's been unwilling to do.
Specifically, is there one area under consideration where Republicans, in your estimation, might come around and say, yeah, let's do this together?
Infrastructure has always been the most bipartisan
but we can't get it done
on Capitol Hill.
We've been trying for how many administrations we've been trying?
I know, but I think the only way we actually get there on an infrastructure bill is if there's a bipartisan agreement of some sort.
As it stands right now, it looks like there's no agreement on anything infrastructure because, as the Republicans put it, there's too much non-infrastructure in the infrastructure deal.
I understand, but they're having conversations. We're going to know here pretty soon whether we're going to get to a bill or we won't.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your time.
Jeff, it was great. Nice to see you.
Appreciate it. See you soon.